Executive Suite with WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi.
When Angus Davis was 18 years old, the Barrington teenager moved across the country to join a little startup called Netscape, giving him a front row seat to the dot-com boom of the 1990s. Now Davis is back home in Rhode Island as the founder of Swype Lee, a tech startup for restaurants, retailers, and other businesses that counts the founder of LinkedIn among its investors.
Swype Lee is a new service for local merchants that transforms the cash register into a powerful marketing machine to grow sales.
When he's not busy running Swype Lee, Davis hasn't been shy about weighing in on Rhode Island's biggest economic debates, making him an influential, youthful voice in the local business community. This week on Executive Suite, Swype Lee CEO, Angus Davis.
Welcome to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi. I was getting a critique of my opening package in the pictures of Angus. You are not from Barrington. You're from Bristol. That's incorrect on my part.
That's right. Grew up on Hope Street.
To our East Bay viewers, you're not all the same to me. I apologize. A Bristolian right here. Angus, thanks for being here or returning to the show. So we had a little about what Swype Lee is there in the show, but I want to start. There'll be people here who haven't heard of it or just aren't quite sure what you do over there. So give me the elevator pitch. What is Swype Lee? What do you do there?
Sure. Swype Lee is a simple internet tool that helps local merchants like a restaurant, a retailer, turn the data behind all of the transactions into something they can act on to better understand their customers and to grow their sales. So for instance, a local restaurant can use Swype Lee to better understand who's coming in, which items are selling best, which items bring customers back, things like that. And it doesn't require any changes in the store. So all of our technology sort of works in the cloud, as they say. Basically what we're doing is we're bringing some of the same internet technologies that big companies and e-commerce companies have used to local Main Street small businesses.
So let's give people a concrete sense of how it works. Are you know, I think of my days at Bliss Brothers in Attleboro as a waiter, and we had the little credit card machine. Do you sell your own version of that machine, or does it hook in somewhere else? How does that work concretely?
Sure. One of the nice things about Swype Lee is we work with the machine or the hardware and software that our customers, like the restaurant, already has.
Okay.
So we basically are a service, and we integrate or talk to those systems that they already have. So they don't have to, the restaurant owner doesn't have to change their software, their hardware, their store operations, but they're able, using Swype Lee now, we plug into all of that stuff, and we can now show them who their best customer is, or what percentage of their sales last week came from repeat versus first-time customers, or what percentage of people that ordered the fish tacos came back within a month.
So it's really about, I was saying to you before we started this show, it reminds me how in media now we have all this data about which stories get clicked on, when people on our websites, things like that. It sounds like it's bringing that kind of deep understanding of what's happening inside your business to organizations that haven't had that before.
That's absolutely right. The first 10 years of the internet and e-commerce was largely about taking ideas that worked offline and just making them work online. So imagine, you know, like the LL Bean catalog used to get in the mail, they just stuck it on the internet. The last 10 years, from sort of, 2005 on, we've seen pure play e-commerce companies essentially lap the traditional retailer in terms of their sophistication with using technology to help them grow their business. I think the next 10 years, the big opportunity is to take those techniques and technologies that have been so successful online, bring them to the 95% of retail that still happens offline, places like a local restaurant or a local retailer. And so that's really what we're focused on, is some of those techniques that you're talking about, bringing them to offline local businesses.
And I want to talk about the growth of Swype Lee. I remember writing, the first time I ever wrote about Swype Lee, I was still at PBN, it was May 2010, and you've morphed in a number of ways how the company, what its focus is now. But tell me a little bit about the growth at this point, how big the company has gotten in terms of sales and staff size, and also you have a new location, I know. So where are things today with Swype Lee, and what's fueling that growth?
Sure. We really started to hit our stride middle of 2012, and that's when we integrated the payments acceptance capability into our product. And since that time, we've been experiencing really phenomenal growth. In 2013, we grew the business over 500%, from a revenue standpoint. We started the year in 2013 with under 30 employees, and today we have over 80 employees.
So more than doubled in a year.
Absolutely, yeah. And In fact, one of the things we look at is how fast we've grown the top line in the business just on a quarterly basis. For the last 4 quarters, we've grown 50% or more each quarter. So it's a phenomenal time for the company in terms of our growth. There's a lot of challenges that you go through. In terms of what's fueling that growth, it's largely that we've found a strong fit between the product that we offer and what our customers, the market, demand. And once you get that, what they call product market fit, that's great. That's, you're on a roll. And then it's a question of, okay, that's like a fire. How do we pour gasoline on that fire and turn that into something big? So now we have over 1,000 customers in over 30 states across the US. And what's fueling that growth is, we've been essentially ramping up the team and being able to bring our product and through sales and support and so forth to a broader number of customers.
And I keep mentioning restaurants because it's fascinating me how when we first discussed Swype Lee and you had other models, and even when you were on Executive Suite in the end of 2012, restaurants weren't quite as much at the center, but they have really taken to this. I think you said about 2/3 of your customers are restaurants and bars. Why do you think they're so attracted to this, and has that impacted how Swype Lee then considers development and what it does in terms of the product?
Sure. I mean, restaurants are a great fit for Swype Lee's product because generally, especially full-service restaurants, because they want to drive repeat business, they want to understand their customers better. But traditionally, they've lacked the technology sophistication or the money to basically buy really expensive technology tools. But the biggest thing they've traditionally lacked has just been the time. You imagine a small business owner, they're juggling so many different things. So what Swype Lee does is, instead of giving somebody data that you have to crunch and interpret and so forth, we simply give them the answer and help them make the decisions. And it's very easy for them to use. There's little or no incremental cost, and it doesn't require, you don't have to be a nerd like me in order to know how to use it. We've made it pretty intuitive.
So if let's say I open Ted's Cafe and I sign up with Swype Lee because I know you from Twitter, and what could I punch up this morning or tonight when the cafe closes? Like, what are 1 or 2 examples of maybe a dashboard I'd look at or something?
Sure. Well, one of the features our customers really love is actually a database of who their best customers are. Who came in last week, or who this month has been in the most. That's a simple example. Another thing you can do is, if you're a business owner, you might be trying to make decisions about something like your menu. So we take your entire menu and we'll show you which items not just are most popular, which you probably already know, but what you may not know is which item is most likely to turn a first-time customer into a repeat customer, and we can tell you that. Another example would be your servers. You're probably trying to coach your team on how they can do better and improve. And one of the things we found is that some servers do really well and some not as well. Why is that? Well, we can actually show you a breakdown of what each server is selling by category. What you may find, a common thing we find, is that one of your servers might be struggling with something like the wine list. I know when people ask me to take that giant wine menu, I'm always a little bit confused, and they always think because I lived in California that I'm an expert on this stuff.
Every wine.
And we can identify that and help the manager say, oh, wow, this person needs some help learning how to sell the wine. Great, I'm going to train her or train him on the wine list and see a sales result that improves as a result of that.
Now, we're coming up on a break, but I want one more sort of nuts and bolts questions, which I've wondered about, which is, I know a lot of this is based on tracking how the credit card transactions go. Let's say I go to Red Stripe in Providence, let's say if they were a customer, and first I use one credit card, and the next time I use a different one. Does Swype Lee know that it's the same Ted Nisi who had the fish and chips the first time and came back later for the soup?
Oftentimes we can do some of that. It's gets a little bit into the weeds exactly how that all works, but yes, we have ways of doing that, and many of the times the customer database works with multiple credit cards. I think at the end of the day, the exciting thing that business owners are able to do is tie together data from a lot of different places. So there's the credit card, yes. There's the in-store data, like which menu items, which servers. And there's also the online data. For instance, if you're looking at a report on Swype Lee about one of your dishes, like the pasta, it will show you all the online reviews on Yelp, Google, OpenTable, whatever, that mention that particular dish. About 50% of all restaurant reviews actually mention a particular menu item. We put that all into one place to save the owners a lot of time.
That's fascinating. This is super cool. All right, well, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about Swype Lee and also about what Angus thinks of some of the big ideas being put forward to help Rhode Island's economy get out of the doldrums it's been stuck in. So stick with us on Executive Suite. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nisi, and this week I'm pleased to be joined. He's returning to the show after a little more than a year since last time you were on. Angus Davis. He's the CEO of Swype Lee, which does analytics for merchants, which is what we're talking about right now. And Angus, we were talking off air a little bit about how when you were first envisioned Swype Lee and founded the company, raised some money to get it off the ground, you saw it as a consumer-oriented company, maybe with individuals looking at their purchases, something like that. Obviously, it's shifted now. It's a business-to-business oriented company, and it's running very successfully for restaurants. But I'm curious, as an entrepreneur, sort of how do you be open to such a large, it'd be like if Channel 12 realized all the money was in radio. We'd have to do a lot of changes to get ourselves there, even if we had a little bit of it. How were you sort of able to navigate that and keep things on track? I guess, what would you recommend to others to listen?
Sure. Well, when you're a high growth, especially venture-backed technology company, I liken it a little bit to getting in a airplane and jumping out with your and the goal is you've got to make sure you get that parachute figured out before you hit the ground. So one of the worst mistakes you can make as an entrepreneur just starting out is if you burn up 8,000 feet of altitude, if your chute isn't opening, just sort of hoping. You have to be responsive to what's going on. And so, if at first the first chute doesn't open, you got to work on that second chute right away and keep on iterating until you find out what's going to work. And certainly that requires a certain degree of being able to admit when you're wrong and be honest about that and then react to what the market is telling you.
And is there still something, I have a sense there is, but that connects your original vision for Swype Lee when you were first putting together funding and starting to put together a team and today's Swype Lee? Is there a basic insight or something?
No, absolutely. It's always been about unlocking the value of the data behind transactions. And so that's still true today. What we found when we started to really hit our stride is that the best value for that was working with local merchants, more so than on the consumer side.
And have you had to learn a lot about the restaurant business, for instance? I've never known you to be a restaurateur. I know I've seen you at a restaurant once in a while, but have you had to learn a lot about these specific industries as well as the others?
Absolutely, yeah. We have an entire team of folks whose whole job it is to basically ensure the success of the retailers and restaurants and other types of businesses that work with us, and they really are experts in that area. And so the answer to your question is yes.
People, I guess you get to eat a lot of restaurants, which is nice at least, or your team maybe.
A little bit. Yeah.
Some people who know your own story, you and the co-founders of Tell Me Networks famously sold it to Microsoft around, I think, 2007.
Correct.
For quite a bit of money, and people might wonder, do you see yourself exiting Swype Lee soon, maybe selling the company to some larger enterprise or it gets incorporated somewhere else? I mean, are you open to that, or do you want this to grow as an independent firm?
My real focus is growing it as a large, durable, independent company for the long haul. You always look at those things and react as situations come up, but generally I think you're going to create the most value for everyone involved by trying to build a long-term, sustainable, independent, big company, go public someday, things like that. So those are that's what you definitely want to aim for. You start aiming any lower, you'll never get there.
And do you have a goal for when you expect the company to be profitable? I know you've gotten a lot of venture funding so far.
Sure. Right now our focus is more on growing the top line just as fast as we can. So we've basically just been investing a lot in facilitating that. We know we can grow faster with the investor backing that we have. So the financial health of the company right now is very strong. We're backed by some of the greatest investors around. So we feel great about where we are on that front.
And how, I was reading just the other day a long look at Amazon.com's business model. And one of the fascinating things people might not realize is that Amazon has always made very little to no profits historically. They've invested almost everything that comes into growth and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I know you hope to be an Amazon-sized company someday, but how do you sort of decide and figure out, at what point do we have to really focus on, all right, what's our profit versus when you're in growth mode? How do you figure out when you're switching?
Sure. Well, you're always focused on the bottom line at the end of the day. You care about cash and making sure that's almost like your altitude above the ground we were talking about earlier. So making sure that there's always adequate runway to continue rapidly growing the business. But Amazon's a great example. They've grown that business 20% per year or better every year since inception. So, I mean, that's incredible. Even at the size that they're at now, they're still growing at that rate. We're growing currently at Swype Lee over 50% per quarter, which is awesome, but the law of large numbers suggests that's going to be pretty tough as the numbers keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But right now, the opportunity is growth.
And you always talk about the importance of employees to any enterprise, and especially at Swype Lee. What's your experience been like recruiting employees in Rhode Island today for a company like yours?
Sure. Well, we're definitely hiring. Shameless plug.
And it's a great website. I was telling you, it's very clean, nice nice website.
Yep.
They say you can get Macs with big monitors, which I think is always a great selling point.
That's one of the cool perks of working there. I mean, we have an open office environment. We offer a lot of career development. People can come in and have a big impact and see the value of their work immediately. And what I love is every day I come in and I work with people that, I meet somebody who's smarter than me about something, and we're learning from each other. But yes, certainly recruiting talent is one of our number 1 challenges. And so it's something we're very focused on, is trying to get the best possible people on board that we can. The team is the most important piece.
And what are you doing? I mean, we don't have MIT in our backyard in Providence. What are you doing to find those people?
Sure. We have some great schools in our backyard, though. I mean, for example, the gentleman that leads our engineering team, he has a PhD from MIT, and the school he recruits out of most heavily is actually Northeastern. So there's some great schools in the greater Boston area, as well as right here at home in Providence, whether that's Rhode Island School of Design. We've got some great design folks coming in from Providence College. We've got some great folks coming in from there, and all over the board. We also hire folks, oftentimes we're looking for folks that might have some experience, and that's where, frankly, the talent pool in Rhode Island is a bit shallower than some of the other markets like Boston or New York. And so that's where we face challenges. What we'll sometimes do, we'll relocate people here. Like I've relocated folks here from Washington, D.C. I just relocated a woman here from Philadelphia. So that's always exciting to get them into Providence.
To bring them here and hopefully lock them in. All right, we're going to take another break. We're going to talk more afterwards about employment and education, which is a key part of how you get those employees, as well as what Angus thinks about the ongoing governor's race. Stick with us on Executive Suite. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi, and I'm joined this week by Angus Davis, CEO of Swype Lee, which is based in Providence. Just moved. Where's the new office? You have a new one, right?
Right in Kennedy Plaza.
Right there at Dorn Street, down that area. We were talking about employees and hiring before the break, and one thing I'm interested in, we're constantly talking about the pipeline of talent in Rhode Island, where people are going to get jobs. You're the one who's actually creating and hiring for a job. So what are you looking for? What's the number 1 thing you look for in a person you're hiring at Swype Lee these days?
Sure. Well, in a startup environment where you have a small number of people being asked to, frankly, do more than they should be able to do, you're really looking for somebody who has that mindset that's going to be successful in an entrepreneurial environment. And one of the interview questions that we have on our website, I'll probably actually be sort of giving away something here, but we ask sort of silly questions like, hey, if you could imagine yourself being one of these people, what would it be? What would you be most proud to sort of say you'd accomplished? And it's things like, I was a loyal employee for 20 years at IBM, or I was on the pre-IPO team at Google, or what have you. And one of the options is, I was on the team that brought Apollo 13 back to Earth. And that's the right answer, right?
Okay.
That is, somebody who wants to be able to face tremendous adversity and succeed and have an opportunity to be a team that people are still talking about for what they were able to accomplish by working together.
And that fits in with another question I had, which is you talk on your website, you have a section for the potential employees. You talk about being a tiny slice of Silicon Valley here in Providence. I mean, when we think of that, we think of like foosball games at Google and things like that. I mean, what does that actually mean to you, though, to say that you've got a slice of, especially as a Netscape alum, it's Silicon Valley here?
We do have the foosball game and the beer fridge and the free lunch brought in every day and all that open office environment and so forth. But really what it means is that we're a fast growth company. There's a lot of opportunity for individual employees to have a big impact in the business, and you can see the impact of your work. For example, an engineer starts on our team. The first day or the first week they're on the job, they're going to check code in, and it's going to go to the live environment and be benefiting thousands of customers. So people have a chance to be thrown into the deep end of the pool, if you will, and it's an open, transparent environment where we're honest with each other about what's working, what's not, and we help each other win. And so it's an exciting place. If you come, you'd see there's a real buzz, a real energy to the workplace.
How much were you shaped by those being there in the start of the .com era, at Netscape and everything else around you there? How much is that still, is it faded into just a misty memory now, or does it still affect how you run your business?
No, I think that's the whole that's core to my DNA. That's really the culture I was brought up in. You'd meet somebody in Silicon Valley at the grocery store, and they'd say, "What are you working on?" And somebody would say, "Oh, I'm building a rocket ship." And somebody would say, "Oh, cool. What kind of rocket fuel are you using?" Anything is possible. And that type of aiming high. That's a big part of Silicon Valley. It's okay to fail. What's not okay is to set your mark too low and achieve it. You want to aim high.
And I can imagine, bringing it back to Rhode Island, politicians, other local leaders listening to this conversation sort of salivating. You have a local entrepreneur talking about a high-growth business, hiring a lot of people, but you know, in some ways, it can seem almost like an accident of history because you happen to be born in Bristol, not Barrington. You're born in Bristol. So, of course, you came back where you're from and you built it here. But if you'd been born in Austin, Swype Lee would be there. I mean, how much can Rhode Island and Providence really do to get more people to start companies like yours here versus just, you know, relying on history and who gets born here?
Sure. I mean, I had some advantages being able to come back to my home state. But at the end of the day, what matters to entrepreneurs, are like me anyway, are not things like, you know, knocking down the tax rates per se or things of that sort that we tend to focus on. What really matters is access to talent. We need a talented workforce. That's the #1 thing, and that's why I've personally got involved in issues like education reform, because that both helps us attract really talented folks with experience who are parents and want to send their kids to the best possible schools. It also sets up our kids for really promising opportunities in the future. So access to talent is key, and having a fair, even playing field. You know, never asked for any type of, you know, government funding or anything like that. Just give us a fair, even playing field. Set us up for success with a talented workforce, good infrastructure, and so forth. That's what we need to win.
And when I mentioned the governor's race, when you're not asking you to handicap the candidates for newsmakers, but when you listen to the conversation and the things being discussed, obviously the economy is just at the center of it all. Do you hear a focus on the things that you hear discussed when you're with other, you know, CEOs? Think of Charlie Kroll and others who are running these small but fast-growing businesses that are in Providence. Are those being discussed, or do you think they're sort of off to the side a little from what's taking up the news of the day?
Well, the risk with all the politicians is they sometimes focus on these small wedge issues that make for great headlines but aren't going to change the fact that we have the nation's highest unemployment rate. We need to have a relentless focus on job growth, increasing prosperity for all Rhode Islanders. That's what I want to hear more about from our gubernatorial candidates. Too often we get focused in the weeds of, you know, I don't know, I'll give you an example, you know, driver's licenses for folks that, you know, aren't fully documented, for example. Is that really the difference between growing the economy here and not? No, it's a complete waste of time to be distracted by that type of nonsense. We need to focus on growing the Rhode Island economy. That should be the lion's share of what these folks are talking about, and that's going to help all Rhode Islanders. It makes all the other problems a lot easier to solve when your economy is growing on fire as opposed to, you know, having the highest unemployment rate of any state in the nation.
And you started Swype Lee, we're getting up to the end of the show, but in 2010, it's kind of toward the worst part of Rhode Island's downturn, although it's not that much better now, unfortunately. But, you know, do you feel that there's the mood has changed significantly over the couple of years you've been, you know, been a local business owner and CEO running Swype Lee?
There's some great organizations locally that are encouraging the entrepreneurial community, organizations like other startups, as well as the community that folks like Beta Spring have contributed to and so forth. So I think that that's starting to happen. But we as Rhode Islanders, we have this sort of, sometimes have this what I describe as a kick dog mentality. We sort of have a negative response to everything. We need to believe that winning is possible, right? We need to act as if. And
someone's going to hear that and say, oh, but that's just happy talk.
Well, I mean, look, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. And if you sit around saying we can't do it and negative, 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 then you're going to achieve, it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. We need to think bigger. We need to have big ideas for Rhode Island, and we need to make them happen, and we need to work together.
All right, that's all the time we have. Angus Davis, thank you very much for being here. Be sure to tune in next week when our guest will be Bert Krenka, the director of AS220, and I'll see you back here next week on Executive Suite.